Good morning. Welcome to our press conference today with Commission President Ursula von der Leyen and European Council President Charles Michel. This press conference will preview the G20, which is taking place this weekend. President, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you very much. Good morning. The upcoming G20 summit this weekend could mark a new beginning for global cooperation. 2020 has been a very difficult year, but the G20 rose to the challenge and they provided leadership. In fact, the G20 has proven a strong pillar and a key partner for the European Union, helping us to keep international cooperation running. Some of the main areas we've been working on in the G20 context are health, the economy, climate change and better environmental protection to prevent future disasters. And in all these four areas, Europe has recently made decisive contributions alongside the G20 and has driven the agenda forward on the global stage. So let me refer to these topics. First of all, of course, global health and the coronavirus pandemic. This pandemic has caused an unprecedented shock to the entire world in terms of lives lost, livelihoods affected, and of course economic costs. Naturally, our top priority is to stop the virus, not only in Europe but in the world. And for this, we need to continue investing to make sure that vaccines and therapeutics can be mass-produced and can be distributed globally at affordable prices. We have been instrumental in helping set up the ACT Accelerator and its COVAX facility. These are our main tools to achieve the wide distribution. Now, as of November 2nd, 94 high-income countries have confirmed their participation in COVAX and 92 low- and middle-income countries. The objective is to purchase 2 billion doses by the end of 2021 for the low- and middle-income countries. Pledges of $1.8 billion have recently been made for procuring vaccine through COVAX for the low and middle income countries. More will be needed in 2021 for vaccine procurement, so the estimates are around $5 billion US. And funding is also needed for testing and treatment in the ACT Accelerator. The total needs were estimated at $38 billion, of which $4 billion have been made available so far. The funding needs for the ACT Accelerator seems to be very big, very large, but they are small in comparison with the costs of this pandemic. And this is why I have written to the G20 together with Erna Solberg, Cyril Ramaphosa and Dr. Tedros to ask for support to mobilize the funds needed. Let me stress another point in the context of the pandemic. The world needs to be better prepared to protect humanity against future pandemics. We have to learn our lessons. And of course, we will need to work together beyond the current coronavirus pandemic. The World Health Organization should play a leading role in this field. And yes, it needs to draw the lessons from the current pandemic and improve its overall effectiveness. In fact, all countries need to better work together for improving global health security. That's a new topic. And to support these efforts, the European Union will co-host next year a global health summit with the Italian G20 presidency. That's the point where it has to be discussed. And while the United States has resisted engaging on this topic so far, I'm very hopeful now with the new president-elect that this will change. Indeed, the next administration has already committed to increase multilateral cooperation, including in the health field. The second big topic, of course, of the G20 is the economy. And since the beginning of this crisis, Europe has lived up to the phrase, we will do whatever it takes to support our economy. And yes, other G20 members have also adopted bold economic measures to minimize the economic and social damage from the pandemic. Tomorrow, I will stress the importance of maintaining economic support measures until the recovery is firmly underway. I will also stress that our collective recovery must be sustainable and it must be inclusive. It must be in line with the 2030 agenda and its sustainable development goals as our compass. Here, the European Union will lead by example, by focusing on the twin green and digital agenda. You know our priorities, and we're aiming to achieve climate neutrality by 2050. We will also continue to promote an inclusive and equal recovery based on robust social protection systems, on decent work for everyone, and on women and youth empowerment. And we will emphasize the need to continue supporting the most vulnerable, in particular Africa. In this context, I very much welcome the G20 debt service suspension initiative that provides debt relief to the poorest countries and its extension for another 6 months. This brings me to the third big point, that is climate change. Last year at G20, the US broke the consensus in view of their opposition to the Paris Agreement. This year, I'm happy to see that US are supporting the conclusions. At the summit, I will once again urge G20 partners to commit to the full and effective implementation of the Paris Agreement. We've made progress. The European Union is already walking the talk. As you know, we started the European Green Deal a year ago when we committed to reach climate neutrality by 2050. And as you know, that we have proposed to reduce EU greenhouse gas emissions by at least 55% by 2030. Following our lead, by now half of the G20 members, such as Japan, China, South Korea or South Africa, are already committed to achieving climate or at least carbon neutrality by 2050 or soon after. This is a big step forward. Effectively addressing climate change will require a decoupling of economic growth from the exploitation of limited natural resources. COP26 in Glasgow in November 2021 will be an important moment to consolidate the world's ambitions in this respect. We also expect, of course, new momentum from the new US administration on this issue, thanks to the President-elect's declaration that the US would join the Paris Agreement once again. Alongside fighting climate change, we need to focus global efforts on protecting our nature and addressing the alarming loss of biodiversity we see around the world. This is as important for our nature as it is for our health and our economies. We all know that the increasing pressure on our nature and wildlife is a major factor behind the rise of zoonotic diseases, and it is a fertile breeding grounds for future pandemics. This is why we need an ambitious global agreement at the next UN Biodiversity Conference in Kunming in China next year. This COP15 for nature must basically be like the COP21 was for climate, and we need a Paris-style agreement to go with it. Our recent biodiversity strategy calls for protection of at least 30% on both the EU's land and sea areas by 2030, but we need the same ambition at the global level if we are to protect humanity against this global threat. Voila, as you can see, tomorrow's G20 summit is the occasion to mark a new beginning in multilateral cooperation to address global challenges we all face. And with our partners, we stand ready to be a real driver of this new beginning. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, President. I now give the floor to the President of the European Council.
Merci beaucoup. Bonjour à chacune et à chacun. Le sommet du G20 qui se tient ce week-end se tient dans un moment unique, un moment essentiel, et ça doit être l'occasion d'exprimer encore une fois la conviction, la foi de l'Union européenne pour le multilatéralisme, pour la coopération internationale, afin de relever les défis auxquels nous sommes confrontés. Et nous allons, Ursula et moi-même, porter la voix, porter le message avec conviction de l'Union européenne. Ladies and gentlemen, in many ways, tomorrow's G20 summit will be about what a post-COVID world will look like and what we want it to look like. We will discuss how to make that future more resilient, more sustainable and more inclusive. And I will share a few concrete ideas in these three areas. First, resilience. COVID-19 has come as a surprise to many of us, but it's not the first global pandemic, and sadly, it won't be the last one. So, how can we prepare for future pandemics? An international treaty on pandemics could help prevent future pandemics and help us respond more quickly and in a more coordinated manner. It should be negotiated with all nations and UN organizations and agencies, in particular the WHO. The WHO must remain the cornerstone of global coordination against health emergencies. A treaty on pandemics could complement its efforts. Second, this weekend's discussions will also centre on how we can build a more sustainable future. Our focus this year is squarely on fighting the pandemic, but the threat of climate change is no less urgent today than yesterday. So, I will say a few words about how our climate goals are linked to our trade and finance policies. First, on trade. We firmly support open trade, and we need to reform the WTO to make our international trade policies greener. And we are working on making respect for the Paris Agreement an essential part on all future comprehensive trade agreements. And, as you know, we have decided to make Europe the first climate-neutral continent by 2050. We will not accept that substandard goods unfairly compete with European products and damage the planet. We are looking into establishing a carbon border adjustment mechanism to avoid carbon leakage. This mechanism would, of course, be in line with WTO rules. Climate change is a global challenge. We therefore need to create a green global level playing field. Second, the green transition is a huge opportunity to drive forward our economies, and to make this happen, we need massive investments. The private sector will be key to these investments. There are no global standards for so-called green bonds, for example, and this, in my opinion, a missing link and an area where we can make progress. We need to develop common standards for these green bonds that mobilise saving for green investments. The European Union has started work on this, and we believe the G20 should urgently address the global issue of green finance. Finally, how can we make our post-COVID world more inclusive? COVID-19 has hit the most fragile hardest, and G20 finance ministers have done good work. The G20 debt moratorium is a good step in the right direction, and it might have to be extended beyond mid-2021, but in our opinion, it's not enough. We are convinced that more debt relief is needed. All creditors need to do their share. No country must be perceived as getting a free ride. Multilateralism means everyone on board. We need a new model of sustainable financing for development, particularly in Africa, to break the cycle of over-indebtedness. Mesdames et messieurs, le moment auquel nous sommes confrontés, la crise du Covid-19, a montré parfois de manière brutale et douloureuse notre interconnexion, nos interdépendances. Elle a montré aussi la force du multilatéralisme et de la coopération internationale. Nous allons probablement réussir en moins d'un an à agréer des vaccins alors que traditionnellement il faut en moyenne 10 ans pour être capable de développer et de produire des vaccins. Nous avons fait la démonstration de la capacité aussi de l'Union européenne à donner des réponses rapides pour tenter de soutenir l'impact et les conséquences de l'impact économique de cette pandémie. Mais nous sommes convaincus que l'Union européenne, par les valeurs que nous défendons, par les valeurs que nous incarnons et qui constituent l'ADN, doit, dans le cadre multilatéral, et ce week-end dans le cadre du G20, tenter de porter la voie du bon sens, la voie de la coopération, la voie de l'efficacité. C'est ce que nous allons de faire, à la fois pour tenter de participer à la construction d'un monde plus résilient, plus juste, plus robuste. Nous voulons apporter notre contribution, apporter notre part, apporter notre vision. Et en cela, nous sommes heureux de pouvoir demain contribuer, nous l'espérons, avec interactivité, à faire bouger les lignes dans le bon sens pour faire en sorte que demain, nous soyons plus solides et plus robustes que nous ne le sommes aujourd'hui. Merci.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président du Conseil européen. Nous allons maintenant passer aux questions. I would ask you please to switch on your camera and to specify to whom you are addressing your question. And we start with Ansgar Hase. Ansgar, you have the floor.
Question to both of the leaders. There's great concern that there will be not enough support from the G20 summit for the world poorest countries in the corona crisis. So I would like to know, how do you assess the progress made so far in the debt relief talks? Is there any chance that you see that it will go far enough? Thank you.
Peut-être un mot sur ce sujet. Vous savez que nous sommes extrêmement engagés sur le plan européen et depuis de nombreuses années déjà pour le développement, pour rencontrer les objectifs du développement durable. Et c'est en ça que nous mobilisons des moyens qui sont majeurs pour soutenir les pays les plus fragiles, les pays en développement. Premier point. 2, c'est l'Union européenne qui a été à l'avant-garde très immédiatement, dès le début de la crise, pour s'assurer que l'on allait raisonner sur la question des vaccins afin que les vaccins soient un bien commun accessible pour tout le monde. Nous voulons continuer à y travailler. Et troisième élément, c'est l'Union européenne qui a été très mobilisée pour porter dans les instances adéquates la question du débat sur la dette des pays les plus vulnérables. Vous savez aussi que nous aurons au mois de décembre un meeting avec l'Union africaine, les leaders de l'Union africaine, et ce sera un des points clés, le financement du développement et comment peut-on garantir que les pays européens puissent être mobilisés pour faire les choix pertinents, les choix justes. Nous sommes très actifs sur ce sujet-là, singulièrement dans le cadre de l'alliance avec l'Afrique, et nous pensons que le développement du secteur privé, le développement des infrastructures est une question clé pour soutenir plus d'emplois, plus de développement, plus de prospérité dans l'intérêt de l'Afrique et dans l'intérêt de l'Europe. Et nous voulons relancer cette alliance ambitieuse entre l'Union européenne et l'Union africaine. Et certainement, la réunion demain du G20 sera l'occasion à nouveau pour nous, Ursula et moi-même, de porter ce message ambitieux parce que nous considérons que le monde ne se portera mieux, que le monde sera meilleur si nous réussissons à faire en sorte que tous les pays puissent participer de manière plus fructueuse à ce processus de développement dont on a besoin.
Mrs. President.
Yes, perhaps to complement that, Indeed, the debt relief is an important pillar, but also, of course, the access to vaccines, treatments and diagnostics in the corona pandemic, without any question. And there, the fact that we were able to, first of all, create together the ACT Accelerator for vaccines, diagnostics and tests, the development of those, but also that we created together the COVAX facility that, as I said, is responsible under the supervision of Gavi to purchase and deploy vaccines to low and middle income countries, and they're certainly increasing to the African Union. This is an important pillar to fight the pandemic, a precondition to pick up again with economic activities. And here the pledging so far, the funding in the COVAX facility is $1.8 billion, of which 800 million euro. Team Europe, so the European Commission and the 27 member states have funded. It's the largest funding in the world for the COVAX facility, and I think this shows a focusedly addressing the need for a vaccine to fight the pandemic. Besides that, of course, all the investment, the economic investment for the economic cooperation we do have are crucial. This has been detailed out by the President of the Council.
Thank you. We now move to James Franey. James, you have the floor.
Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
Right, it's working now. Yes, thank you very much, Eric, for this question. Yes, to both presidents, if I may, Ireland's broadcaster RTE has just reported that 95% of the Brexit trade deal has been completed. Very simply, to both presidents, is that true, yes or no? And then if you could just please give us a steer on the timeline. When do you think this deal is going to be 100% finalised? Thank you.
Well, zero comment on percentages, because you know that nothing is agreed till everything is agreed. This is a precondition, but indeed, after difficult weeks with very, very slow progress, now we've seen in the last days better progress, more movement on important files. This is good. We still have, of course, the three main difficult issues: the governance, the fisheries and the level playing field. But within the frame of the level playing field, progress, for example, has been made on the question of state aid. But there's still there are quite some meters to the finish line, so there's still a lot of work to do. What the timelines are concerned, indeed, the time pressure is high, without any question. At the moment being, there is a break because there was a COVID-19 positive case in the negotiating team. Good is that before that, legal text was on the table. So there's a lot to work on, and this gives the precondition to proceed, for example, if necessary, in VTCs, because there's now substance where you can go through line by line, word by word, to work on that. The whole team is engaged and working tirelessly day and night to indeed reach the natural deadline. We have to be done by the end of the year.
I don't know if the President of the European Council wants to add anything.
No, I have nothing to add, and I fully share the answer expressed by Ursula.
Very good, thank you. Then we move over to David Herschenhorn.
Thank you, Eric, for both presidents. Thanks. There's some concern that because of the pandemic, this has been a bit of a lost year otherwise in global diplomacy. Because the Sherpas, the ministers couldn't travel. I wonder if you could talk about, are there goals that you would have liked to see achieved by this G20 chaired by Saudi Arabia? And also, if you could just address, there's also the matter of not being in Riyadh as had been planned, that perhaps the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is avoiding some questions and concerns about human rights that would have been raised. I wonder if you're communicating those in some other fashion to your virtual hosts. Thank you.
This is certain that indeed we have adapted our way of working, because you observe that we used a lot and we will continue to use a lot virtual meetings. It's not exactly the same, because at the diplomatic level it's also useful to have some meetings in person in order to try to create more confidence, more trust, in order to negotiate. It's also easier to have meetings in person. Even at the European level, you have observed that during many months it was difficult to have a physical meeting. It's only in July that we had this meeting in order to agree on the next multi-annual budget and the recovery fund. This is my first point. About Saudi Arabia, this is a multilateral meeting that we have this meeting, but we know that at the bilateral level we don't hesitate to put very high on the agenda the question of the human rights, democratic values and the freedoms. And at the geopolitical level, we have worked very hard with all the institutions, but especially with the High Representative, in order to promote our values, to defend our interests. And you know that we had the last months debate, orientation and strategic debates at the level of the European Council in order to try to strengthen our European unity on important and even essential geopolitical challenges.
I can only emphasize what the President of the Council said. Indeed, on the bilateral side, we follow very closely the situation of human rights in Saudi Arabia, but also of the people defending the fundamental rights, including women's rights and individual rights. So this is an ongoing topic, and it's a very serious topic. But I also want to emphasize that it's important that we delink the multilateral and the bilateral aspects. And this multilateral forum has a very strict agenda. It has a very clear protocol. It's not a bilateral summit. The chair changes every year, rotates every year. So the G20 is a specific place, and beside that, we have the bilateral topics. What the topics are concerned, we are discussing in G20. It is very good that the green topic, climate change, is top of the agenda. This needs urgent attention from all of us. And the good part is in G20 you can see how things changed from one year to the next. And if I look at the fact that a year ago there were almost no declaration of strict goals of climate and carbon neutrality. Well, this year we have more than half of the G20 that have declared either carbon neutrality or climate neutrality by 2050 or shortly after, shows that there is a good movement going on. We hope for the US to join, too, with very clear and distinct goals. So this is one topic that is important. And any G20 presidency with this situation, of course, has to deal with the topic of the pandemic as we've described right now.
Thank you. We have time for one last question, and it goes to Oliver Grimm. Oliver.
Do you see me?
Yes.
I hope you hear me. My camera, yes, I think you see me now. Sorry. Yes. Question to President von der Leyen. Oliver Grimm with the Austrian newspaper Die Presse. The World Health Organization is now actively advising against the use of remdesivir in the treatment of hospitalized patients. A panel organized by the World Health Organization came to the conclusion that it has no effect on the treatment. It doesn't alleviate the respiratory distress that these patients are in. So basically, it doesn't work. My question to you is, has the Commission gotten in touch with Gilead, the producer, from whom you bought doses to the tune of about, I think, 70 million euros? Do you see a way, secondly, of getting at least part of the money back? Thirdly, what would be your advice to member states now? Should they continue using remdesivir or not? And thirdly, in light of this, is there any sort of insurance clause in the in the deals you now sign with vaccine producers, that in the case of an échec, in the case of these vaccines not working, you might get some of the money back? Thank you.
So first of all, I will not get into a scientific analysis of remdesivir. This is for science to do that. I think this is important to look into the data, to look into the reasoning of the WHO, but this is for our scientists to do that and then to draw the necessary conclusions on it. What the vaccines are concerned, one of the main negotiating points in the contracts for the vaccines is, of course, liability. So they have to be effective and they have to be safe. The way we approach building the portfolio for the European Union is that the Commission provides advanced purchase agreements with investment in the build-up of capacities to produce masses of this vaccine in case that it is a successful vaccine. So it is a bet indeed, in this case on 6 to 7 different vaccines. So far, we've gone well with that. Later on, if a vaccine is a success, proves efficient, then the member states are able to buy the pre-reserved doses. This is the stepwise approach we have in this field. So in other words, the broad portfolio shows that there are 2 points that are important. Make sure that you don't miss any technology that is produced on the European market, and make sure that the capacities for production are built up widely, as we need a lot of vaccination for the 450 million people in the European Union and, of course, our neighborhood too.
Thank you very much. With that, we conclude today's press conference. Thank you for your attention.